Beneath the burning jungles of the Yucatán, satellites are revealing something no one expected. The buried veins of a mega-civilization. Thousands of temples, causeways, and pyramids, once hidden beneath roots and vines, forming a network so vast it rivals ancient Egypt. This wasn't just a kingdom, it was a world, a pulse of stone and blood stretching for hundreds of miles. But to understand what lived and what died here, you have to look inside the body of Mexico itself, because its DNA is not just ancestry, it's a battlefield. Every strand carries scars, epidemics that left cities silent, conquests written in blood, and migrations that folded continents into a single nation. When scientists map the genome of Mexico, they don't just see lineage, they see the ghost of collapsed empires still breathing in modern veins. Every drop of blood tells a story, from the Maya astronomers who built their calendars from the stars, to the Aztec warriors who offered hearts to gods of the sun, to the enslaved, the invaders, and the survivors who refused to vanish. This isn't a history written in books, it's one encoded in flesh. And it begins long before the first sails appeared on the horizon, before the Spanish, a land of many bloodlines. 1,500 years ago, long before Cortez ever set foot on the coast, the land that would become Mexico was already a genetic labyrinth. Over 20 million people thrived here, more than lived in Spain itself. From the deserts of the north to the green lungs of the Yucatán, their bloodlines formed invisible borders, separated not by walls but by rivers, trade routes, and sacred mountains. Archaeologists can still trace those boundaries in DNA. Each people, the Maya, the Zapotec, the Mixtec, the Nahua, carried their own genetic signature, a code born from thousands of years of adaptation. Their fathers shared the lineage QM3, the mark of the first humans who crossed frozen seas into the Americas more than 15,000 years ago. Their mothers bore the ancient signatures of haplogroups A, B, C, and D, each one whispering of a different migration, a different beginning. These weren't isolated tribes. They were civilizations, trading, intermarrying, warring, and building, long before Europe even knew this continent existed. Cities like Teotihuacan rose like mountains of stone, their temples filled with people whose bloodlines came from hundreds of miles apart. Even then, Mexico was a tapestry of nations, a living network of identity and survival, long before anyone called it Mexico. Before we climb deeper into this genetic labyrinth, what do you think? Does DNA reveal more about who we are than history ever could? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And subscribe, because here on Savage Past, we dig deeper than history dares. Then came the ships, white sails tearing through the horizon, their shadows stretching over jungles that had never seen iron. When the Spanish arrived in 1519, they brought more than weapons. They brought a storm. Steel cut through obsidian. Gunpowder thundered in the streets of Tenochtitlan. But their deadliest weapon was invisible. A plague carried in breath and touch. Smallpox, measles, influenza, diseases no one here had ever faced. Within months, they spread faster than any army. Villages turned to graveyards. Priests burned the dead in pyres that glowed through the night. Entire families vanished between dawn and dusk. In just a single century, the population collapsed from over 25 million to barely 2 million, a loss so complete it defied comprehension. A 90% extinction in one generation. No war, no empire, just microbes and misery. Imagine walking through a city where every voice you know is gone, where fires burn with no one left to tend them, where temples crumble not from conquest, but from silence. Archaeologists have found homes left untouched, pots still hung on walls, tools laid neatly beside cold hearths, as if their owners stepped outside and never came back. The plagues were followed by hunger, by forced labor, by mines that swallowed lives whole. Spanish laws declared the natives subjects of the crown, but in practice, they were fuel for an empire. Yet, even through this darkness, the blood refused to die. While many paternal lines were wiped out, the women survived. The old empires had fallen, but their blood still whispered beneath the skin. The birth of a new bloodline. The conquest didn't just destroy, it created. From violence, something new began, a genetic fusion that reshaped an entire continent. The Spanish came without women, and history, as cruel as it is, shows what that meant. Unions, many forced, some chosen, wove together two worlds that were never meant to meet. Today, over 70% of Mexican men carry European Y chromosomes, a legacy of colonizers. But more than 90% of maternal DNA remains indigenous, a legacy of survivors. Fathers from Europe, mothers from the Americas, a new people born in the ashes of conquest. The colonial rulers tried to cage this mixing, labeling it mestizo, mulatto, castizo, assigning worth by blood. But DNA doesn't follow orders. It blended freely, quietly dismantling the hierarchies that tried to contain it. The result was mestizaje, not just mixture, but rebirth, a living contradiction. Descendants of both conqueror and conquered, carrying the stories of both in their veins. And as centuries passed, that new blood spread through cities and jungles alike, layering the old world and the new into one. The forgotten blood of Africa and Asia. For centuries, history told only half the story. It spoke of conquistadors and temples, but not of the chains and sails that crossed the Atlantic behind them. Between the 1500s and 1800s, over 200,000 Africans were brought to New Spain. Dragged from the coasts of Angola, Benin, and the Congo, they were shipped into a world already broken by conquest. The sugar fields of Veracruz, the silver mines of Oaxaca and Guerrero became their prisons. Many never lived long enough to speak their own names again, but their blood survived, hidden in the children born on those coasts, in the rhythm of drums that the church tried to silence, in the curve of a cheekbone or the warmth of a voice. The Y chromosome E1B1A, a genetic marker from West Africa, still appears in modern Mexicans today. And in some coastal regions, up to 10% of ancestry traces back to those ships. Africa didn't just arrive in chains, it became a part of Mexico's pulse. But Africa wasn't the only forgotten continent in the story. Across the vast Pacific, another current was flowing. A route so hidden, most history books barely mention it. From 1565 to 1815, massive Spanish galleons sailed each year between Manila and Acapulco, hauling silk, porcelain, and spices. But in their holds were people: Filipino sailors, Chinese traders, Japanese refugees, and Indian laborers forced aboard for the journey. Some stayed behind, marrying into coastal families and leaving traces of Asia in the Mexican genome. Modern studies reveal faint signatures of Asian ancestry in Guerrero and central Mexico, the genetic echo of forgotten voyages. Local families still speak of Los Chinos, ancestors with eyes shaped by the other side of the sea. It means that in the veins of one modern Mexican, you might find the blood of a Maya astronomer, a Spanish soldier, an African mother, and a Filipino sailor, all tangled into one unbroken story. That's what makes Mexico unique, one of the only places on Earth where indigenous, European, African, and Asian bloodlines merged into a single identity, a living record of global collision. The map of blood. Even after 5 centuries of mixing, Mexico's DNA is far from uniform. If you could lay a genetic map over the land itself, you'd see a mosaic of ancestry carved into the mountains, etched into rivers, and sealed into generations. In the north, where the deserts stretch toward the US border, the blood runs lighter. Regions like Nuevo León and Chihuahua carry up to 60% European DNA, the lingering imprint of colonists and frontier settlers. In the cities, the old indigenous lineages have thinned, replaced by the descendants of Spanish men who came seeking silver and stayed for power. But move south into the forests of Oaxaca, the jungles of Chiapas, and in the Yucatán, the blood is unmistakably Mayan. From facial structure to genetics, Yucatan's people carry one of the most direct lines to the builders of pyramids and cities swallowed by the jungle. Modern DNA shows an almost unbroken thread linking them to the ancient bones found beneath the temples of Calakmul. Every region of Mexico tells a different version of the same story: adaptation, survival, and memory. Even now, scientists can see those patterns in genomes, like ghostly topography, the fingerprints of mountains, migration, and loss. Urban migration has blurred the borders, pulling people from their villages to Mexico City, Guadalajara, and beyond. But even in the capital, DNA keeps whispering old loyalties. A man in the city may carry the blood of mountain Zapotecs, the daughter of an African fisherman, the great-grandmother of a Spanish soldier, all flowing through one heartbeat. And beneath it all lies something older still, a chapter most people never think about. A story not of conquest or empire, but of prehistoric survival. Because some of the genes inside modern Mexicans didn't come from the New World. They came from something much older, a distant ancestor who wasn't even fully human. The ancient code, the Neanderthal in the veins. Long before the first humans set foot in the Americas, our ancestors met another species in the cold shadow of Ice Age Europe. They were shorter, stronger, and older, Neanderthals. And in the frozen dark, they didn't just fight or flee, they interbred. That encounter left behind fragments, tiny strands of code carried forward for 50,000 years. In every modern Mexican of non-African descent, those traces remain. Between 1% and 2% of their DNA is still Neanderthal. It sounds small, but its impact runs deep. Some of those genes affect how skin reacts to sunlight. Others influence how the immune system responds to disease. And one ancient variant, a single inherited mutation, is now linked to metabolic traits that may explain why type 2 diabetes is so prevalent in Mexico today. Think about that. A chance meeting in Ice Age Eurasia may still shape health in modern Mexico. Massive genome projects have mapped Mexico's diversity like never before. Thousands of samples from every region tell the same story, but in 1,000 dialects. On average, the modern Mexican genome holds 48% indigenous, 44% European, and 8% African ancestry. But those are only numbers. What really matters is the variation, the micro differences between neighbors, villages, and valleys. Two families living a few miles apart can have completely different ancestral blueprints. That's because DNA doesn't obey borders, it obeys history. Language, geography, and war shaped every chromosome into a living archive. From the deserts of Sonora to the jungles of Chiapas, from Veracruz's humid coastlines to the peaks of Oaxaca, Mexico's blood tells a story of collapse and rebirth, a saga of empires that fell and the people who refused to vanish. And when you zoom out, past the microscopes, past the history books, you see the truth. Mexico is not one identity, it's many, fused together by survival itself. The final reflection. Look in the mirror. You are looking at millions of years of endurance. In your eyes, the reflection of the Maya astronomer. In your hands, the calluses of the miner. In your cells, the ancient code of Neanderthals. DNA is not just science, it's memory. A memory of hunger, of love, of survival, written in flesh. It is proof that even when civilizations fall, their blood keeps moving, changing form, but never disappearing. So when you walk through the streets of Mexico City or the jungles of the Yucatan, remember, the stones beneath your feet and the blood in your veins come from the same story. Thank you for watching. Be sure to subscribe and join us for the next video, where we uncover more untold stories from humanity's past. Each episode takes us deeper into the mysteries of history, connecting us to the people and events that shaped our world today.